Ladies and gentlemen, this is the 12th and final round.
Right hand, Golovkin steps in and down he goes again. Unbelievable. Mayweather makes him pay. What a rookie mistake. A sensational left hook by De La Hoya.
It's facts. I'm the best. You know what I mean? Sometimes I don't want to believe it myself, but it's the truth. I'm the best.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
From Southern California, this is the Last Round Podcast.
That was a loud bell. Episode 60 of the Last Round Podcast. I'm Danny Z with Michael Shepard. So what, Mike? We started with going back in time here. What? Thrilla in Manila, Rumble in the Jungle, and now we're coming off of
Clash on the Dunes.
Clash on the Dunes, right? This past Saturday.
Doesn't have the same ring to it.
But I, you know what? I might be in the minority, but I appreciated that they try to give it like that, some type of title like that, because it was kind of, obviously it's a throwback heavyweight fight, throwback to Muhammad Ali fights, Rumble in the Jungle, Thrilla in Manila. I appreciated it, regardless if it wasn't over here in the States. We were hoping it was going to be a Vegas fight, even New York, but it's all right. As long as there's boxing, even if it's extending around the world. We're cool about it. Well, once again, guys, thank you for listening to episode 60 of the Last Round Podcast. As I mentioned, coming off, would you say, Mike, the biggest fight of the year in terms of maybe attention?
I would have said so. Obviously, being a rematch and, big in England, big over here. It's definitely one of the biggest.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in your motherland, the UK. Mm-hmm. I heard it did some pretty good ratings or some pretty decent pay-per-view buys.
1.6 million pay-per-view buys.
Reportedly.
According to Eddie Hearn.
Oh, well, Eddie Hearn's a pretty great promoter.
Uncle Eddie.
Sometimes he'll inflate things. But, before we dive into that, with our analysis of the fight, of the event as a whole and everything, Joshua obviously unanimously decisioning Andy Ruiz and recapturing his heavyweight titles. We got another guest on the line who was actually with us not too long ago, who has probably, out of all of our guests, probably gave us the best analysis, and probably, like as I mentioned, knows more about this sport probably than anybody I've ever met. Editor-in-chief of The Ring magazine, which has been around since the 1920s. I don't think he's been the editor since the 1920s, but he's the current editor. He's been the current editor-in-chief of The Ring magazine for a few years now. Dougie Fischer joins us again. Thanks a lot, Dougie. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me on again.
Hey, you're welcome. So, as we mentioned, Joshua gets the unanimous decision win over Ruiz. There was obviously a lot of hype behind this rematch. There was that upset back in June. Ruiz stops him. And then, there was a lot of talk behind the scenes, what happened to Joshua, or did Ruiz just have his number? Did he catch him? And then there's a whole issue with Ruiz being, 15, 16 pounds over what he was in the first fight. I mean, just take us through your analysis and your immediate reaction after the fight was over in Saudi Arabia this past Saturday.
It was an interesting mix of emotions and takeaways. I would say it was the most anticipated fight of 2019, this rematch, because what happened on June 1st is hands down, in a year of upsets, it was the biggest upset of the year and one of the biggest heavyweight championship upsets, maybe ever, but definitely in recent years and decades. It was right up there with Lennox Lewis getting knocked out in South Africa by Hassan Rahman, or Vladimir Klitschko getting sparked by Corey Sanders when he was the hot, young up and coming heavyweight title holder. I think it was bigger than when Layman Brewster knocked out Vladimir Klitschko not long after Corey Sanders pulled the hat trick. So it wasn't Mike Tyson, Buster Douglas shocking, but it was still a surreal experience. And I was there at the Mecca of boxing, Madison Square Garden, June 1st. And it was like being in a bizarre dream. And it looked like Anthony Joshua was caught in a nightmare or just one of those fever dreams you get when you're really, really, really sick. And the way he reacted to the adversity that Andy Ruiz put upon him that night, there were a lot of questions. And boxing fans on both sides of the pond went back and forth over what exactly went wrong for Joshua. Was it just that Andy Ruiz had his number? Was it that Anthony Joshua was overrated from the get-go? Was it that Anthony Joshua didn't have the right trainer or the right people behind him? There were all these questions. There probably should have been more questions about Andy Ruiz going into the rematch, but a lot of people, most people, questioned Andy Ruiz as a late substitute for Jarrell Miller, and Andy Ruiz surprised everybody. So in many ways, he proved himself to those who did not know who he was going into the first Joshua fight. So people were less likely to question Andy Ruiz going into the rematch, even though there were a lot of warning signs. There were a lot of red flags. And it all happened in real time. It's a social media age, so you saw this extended victory lap. And I'm not just talking about going on Jimmy Kimmel or having a parade in his hometown, or buying a car or buying, whatever, Rolex watches and all that kind of stuff. But fighters are going to do that when they make their first 7-figure payday and they upset the odds in the magnitude that Andy Ruiz Jr. did. But it was extended. It just continued. It continued where he was clearly not training. And, I'm familiar with Andy. I knew Andy when he was an amateur. I met him when he was an amateur. And I've known Manny Robles Jr. since Manny was still a boxer. I knew his dad. And I met his dad more than 20 years ago at the LA Boxing Club, right? I'm talking like early to mid 90s.
Right.
So I know, and I keep in contact with, I see him. I see Manny Robles around and Manny's assistant trainers, Edgar Hasso. And I remember when Jasso was a bantamweight prospect. And I would always ask him, hey, is Andy back in camp yet? And they would always say the same thing. No, not yet. And I'd tell them, well, when's he getting back in camp? And the answer is like, when Andy wants to come back to camp. I wanted him to be in camp already. And I'm talking this was like around late August or so, right? So these are all red flags, but it's not like this was a secret. It's not like I was the only person who knew this. If anyone would walk up to Manny and ask him, hey, what's up with Andy? He would tell them the same thing, and then when he finally is in training, they have to go to Mexico, and they have to have you have to have a special cook and a special nutritionist and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, really, you need to do all of this? Like, this opportunity is bigger than the first fight. The opportunity that was in front of Andy Ruiz was you beat Anthony Joshua again, hands down, your fighter of the year for 2019. And hands down, you're automatically one of the top 3 or 4 draws in boxing. You solidify, you make sure you prove to the world that the first fight was no fluke. People don't look at you like Rocky or the Cinderella Man. They just look at you as the unified heavyweight champion who happens to be of Mexican descent and happens to be a really likable guy, somebody with personality. You want to like Andy and you want to root for Andy. So he's got that going for him. So if he can prove that, no, I'm the real heavyweight champion, he automatically becomes one of the biggest stars, one of the biggest names worldwide, and probably a huge attraction whenever he would defend those 3 major world titles here in the United States. And the fact that he wasn't able to be motivated enough because of that potential that was laid out in front of him, the fact that he would squander that opportunity, it lets you know that the book on Andy before the Joshua fight was the truth. What Boxing Insider said about him, or what people at Top Rank would have told you about Andy. Mm-hmm. And what the people at Top Rank would have told you about Andy had you asked them about Andy Ruiz 2 or 3 years ago is tremendous talent, lack of discipline. Simple as that. That was the book on Andy, and that's really what played out. And it shouldn't have been a huge shock that he came in overweight. But even when he came in overweight, there were so many questions about Anthony Joshua that most of the people who would pick Andy Ruiz to beat Joshua again still believe that Ruiz was all wrong for Anthony Joshua. And I don't know if that was because they just had Andy Ruiz fever and they liked the kid so much, or they were Anthony Joshua detractors, or they just never believed in Anthony Joshua, or what have you, or if they had some other agenda or whatever. But I thought the fight was a letdown because Ruiz, to me, didn't make the most of this second opportunity. I don't think he fought in a way that could have really unnerved Anthony Joshua, who was already tense just to share the ring with him, and you could see it in his body language. He boxed a very skittish fight, but he also boxed a very controlled fight. So on the other hand, although the event itself was uneventful because of Ruiz's lack of preparation and because of the very disciplined, safety-first manner in which Anthony Joshua boxed for 12 rounds, I was still impressed with Joshua's game plan and the fact that he was able to follow through, to actually carry it through against somebody who had completely undressed him on June 1st. So I know that Joshua was dealing with a lot of self-doubt, and he was dealing with a lot of demons. And Andy does get under Joshua's skin. I think it's evident. You don't have to be like Eddie Futch to like look at him and see his body language when he shares the ring with Ruiz.
Yeah.
Ruiz freaks him out a little bit, but he handled it. He dealt with it. And I got to tell you, I was impressed with it. And I liked his jab, and I thought he moved well, and I liked the fact that he slimmed down a little bit, and I actually liked that he didn't go crazy, that he didn't get greedy, because Ruiz was like a big bean bag in there. He was just there to be hit. I won't even call him a heavy bag because he wasn't firm enough to be a heavy bag. He was like a bean bag in there. And Joshua was nailing him with some hard jabs, occasional hooks, big right hand, and it didn't move him. And Joshua was smart. He's like, okay, because he was trying to check his chin a little bit, saying, okay, let me see if I can soften you up with some sporadic power punching. And the power punching did not produce the results he wanted to see. So he didn't jump on him. And, some people are criticizing him for that, and I can understand that. But I actually felt that if he had tried to force the knockout, it would have been a stupid move against Ruiz, because he would have given Ruiz the one shot Ruiz needed to turn the tables on him. So I was impressed with Anthony Joshua. And it's, the reaction, according to Boxing Twitter, on Joshua's performance is mixed. You either give him kudos for boxing a disciplined game plan, or you hate on him for stinking it out.
Right. And and I'm glad that you mentioned, that Anthony Joshua, he knew that if he would have got into like a firefight with Andy Ruiz, that was going to be Andy Ruiz's, at least potential openings to catch him again. Because there was a few moments, I think I was telling Mike just before we went on air, I believe it was at the end of the 7th or the 8th round, where Andy Ruiz did catch him, but it was towards the end of the round. And then Joshua walks to his corner, but he's smiling at him, okay, you got me. Going back to Ruiz being overweight and everything. Do you really think that? I mean, obviously it must have affected him in terms of the weight, but do you think that it really? I just feel that because of Joshua's height and he has obviously the reach advantage and everything. Obviously why he lost, I believe the first fight in June is because he engaged with Ruiz, and he might have underestimated him, and then he got caught, and Ruiz was able to land that tempo shot, which was all downhill from there for Joshua. So obviously, like you mentioned, Joshua knew if he engaged with Ruiz in this rematch, that Ruiz probably could have caught him. I mean, there was a couple of shots where Ruiz did catch him, but I think Joshua knew okay, he hit the brakes a little bit harder. I mean, you don't think that I just think Ruiz, whatever his game, I mean, obviously there's ways around, the taller fighter, but I just think Ruiz isn't really the type of fighter to to penetrate like the boxing ability of like an Anthony Joshua. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. So I'll say this. I'll say it had Anthony Joshua, the version of Anthony Joshua that showed up for the rematch, had that version of Joshua stepped into the ring on June 1st, I think he would have outboxed Andy Ruiz. That hungrier, leaner version of Andy Ruiz. So I don't think I think the weight is an indication that Ruiz was not as dialed in as he needed to be to make the most of this second opportunity. But with Joshua boxing in the manner that he was boxing in, he made it almost impossible for even a dialed in Andy Ruiz to capitalize on any mistakes. And here's the basic truth about this matchup. And I actually give Joshua credit for realizing this, because it shows some humility. It shows that he kind of put his pride in check. Joshua realizes that Ruiz can take his best shot, and he can't take Ruiz's best shot. That's a basic truth about that matchup. And when that's the truth, when you're the guy who can't take the other guy's best shot, you need to box safety first. You have to protect your chin, and you have to box in a somewhat negative style. You have to box in a way that's going to neutralize your adversary's aggression. And that's exactly what he did. So he got the W and he moves on. And he basically did what he had to do. And no, everybody's not going to be happy with it, but you can't make everybody happy in boxing. There's a lot of salty bastards out there.
Dougie, what was your take on Ruiz's, kind of honest opinion at the end, saying that he partied too much, he didn't listen to his father and his coach? Because some people seem to be split. Some people liked the honesty that he kind of owned up to his faults, but other people kind of found it disrespectful that, he went in there with probably one of the biggest fights of the year and didn't prepare.
Yeah, it's that's Andy. Andy is honest, but in all honesty, Andy is kind of immature and unprofessional. So he was honest with who he is right now, and we'll see if he can change. But like I said, that was the book on Andy. He came very close to beating Joseph Parker for the vacant WBO title. And then he disappeared.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he got into great shape. I mean, he trained with Abel Sanchez at the Summit Gym on a mountain, in Big Bear Lake, California. And, he listen, I thought he boxed well against Joseph Parker, but then he disappeared, and whatever, he wants out of his contract, or I don't know what exactly the deal was or what the beef was with him with Top Rank, but it wasn't working out, and it didn't seem like he was somebody who was serious about his career. Now then, he signs with the PBC, and whatever, he wins a few fights, and he beats Trinko, and he gets this opportunity, and kudos to him. He sees that opportunity to fight Anthony Joshua on late notice. And in a way, he caught lightning in the bottle, because it was a perfect situation for him where he didn't have time to get out of shape. The opportunity kind of fell into his lap. He didn't have time to kind of overthink it or have time, to be distracted or whatever. And Anthony Joshua was clearly not focused enough on Andy Ruiz. He kind of fell for the happy-go-lucky fat guy persona or image. And what happened on June 1st is what happened. And quite frankly, that's the main reason I wasn't able to pull the trigger on picking Andy Ruiz in this rematch, because I do think style-wise, Andy Ruiz is a handful for Anthony Joshua. There's something about Ruiz's his stature and his hand speed, his combination punching, but also just his personality. I think that unnerved Joshua to an extent. So I did believe that Ruiz had a good shot of winning the rematch, but I had a problem picking him because of his past, and because I wondered if that situation, whatever the 3 weeks going into him being a late substitute for Joshua, replacing Jarrell Miller, if that didn't help him out the first time around, and the fact that he wouldn't have that help in the rematch, that Joshua would be focused on him, I had to go with the more proven quantity, because whether you like Anthony Joshua or not, he is an Olympic gold medalist, and it takes a certain type of character to make it to the Olympic finals and to prevail. And it takes a certain kind of character to be as popular and successful in terms of money and fame as he is in the UK, and still train hard and still be a professional. And he's done that. I think he's handled his fame and his celebrity well. It may have got to his head a little bit going into the Ruiz fight, but you know what? That upset loss brought him back down to earth. But I like Joshua's professionalism and character and track record better than Andy Ruiz's natural talent and the fact that style-wise he's difficult for the British star.
But Dougie, at least to me, I was also telling Mike that, like, I know that the weight gain with Ruiz for this fight, and how he says that he didn't train properly, or he didn't train, how he partied too much and everything. Like, during the fight, though, it didn't really. I mean, you can see from the visual aspect, he was obviously overweight. You can see a little bit, but he was bigger. He was bigger, yeah. But to me, it didn't really look like anything was changed in his style, because he was just, like, as I mentioned, like, he was just waiting for. He needed Joshua to exchange with him in order to win.
He didn't have a willing dance partner.
Right, exactly.
He didn't have a willing participant. I thought his foot speed looked a little bit slower than it did in New York City. But it's hard to say because Joshua fought a different fight. He was heavier. He was muscle bound in the first fight, and he was more aggressive. So it's a little bit different. It was just a different style matchup. It was Joshua boxed in the style that he needed to box in. 100%.
Dougie, what was your take on the fight being in Saudi Arabia?
I didn't like it. I wasn't like, I'm not as outraged as some on moral grounds, even though I do recognize that there are gross human rights abuses that take place in Saudi Arabia. But I also realize that boxing has always been sort of the red light district of sports, and it's always been, they've always gone where the money is, and it's always, going back decades, there was a criminal element that was entrenched into the business and industry of the sport. It had, prior to that, it had been banned in many states. It was illegal. So listen, boxing took place in what was then called Zaire, Africa. Now it's the Republic of the Congo, and there were gross human rights violations going on under that dictatorship when Muhammad Ali and George Foreman fought there. There were heavyweight title fights that took place in apartheid era South Africa. I'm not saying it's okay. It's a good thing. I'm just saying that it's part of boxing's history, and it's prize fighting. And whoever puts up the biggest prize, that's where the fight's going to land. I mean, that's why so many fights happen in Las Vegas. And they don't need to, or the Native American, the Indian casinos or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's boxing always goes where the money is, and Saudi Arabia put up a ridiculous amount of money to get this fight. So I wasn't surprised, but I felt like the promotion could have been better, could have been stronger, had the fight taken place in London or somewhere in the UK. Wales, or back in New York City, or even in Las Vegas. It seemed like the fight week was not as big as it could have been had the fight taken place either in the U.S. or the UK. That's my opinion on that.
Do you think, in regards to Saudi Arabia being obviously the site of the fight, do you think it was also from Matchroom's perspective, because Anthony Joshua is obviously their biggest star, that's their moneymaker, and him losing in June, they didn't know if he was going to, obviously they have faith in him and they were hoping he would win again like he did. But I mean, like, what if he got knocked out again and then he ends up retiring, or they don't know his
Right.
plans. Like, so this kind of like a cash
you
out?
could look at it as a cash out.
Yeah.
You could look at it as a cash out, just worst case scenario. Although I don't think Joshua would have retired had he lost again, unless he got blown out in a round or two. But even then, I think he would just say, well, Ruiz has got my number. I can't beat this guy, but I'm still young. I still, if he still had the desire to box, he would do it. He wouldn't just quit out of frustration. But I think that, maybe that was one aspect of going there. It's like, let's make as much money as we can, in the event that Joshua is not able to regain these heavyweight titles. But also, I think that they realized that Joshua would be very comfortable fighting in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
He's vacationed there before. He has business contacts there. He has friends there. And I think they were pretty sure that Team Andy Ruiz was not quite as worldly as Team AJ. And certainly they weren't used to fighting in the Middle East. So, I think that was also a factor. Is let's put it in a place where if we can't land the fight in the UK, let's put it somewhere where we know Joshua is going to be comfortable and Team Ruiz will not be comfortable.
So where does Ruiz go from here, Dougie?
The great thing about upsets is that it introduces new players to a particular division, to a particular landscape. And it doesn't matter if they're able to capitalize the underdog that sprung the upset, even if they're not able to capitalize for very long on that upset, they remain players. We had that situation when Ricardo Mayorga knocked out Vernon Forrest. And when Vernon Forrest outclassed Shane Mosley. And when Shane Mosley outworked and outpointed Oscar De La Hoya. These guys weren't perfect following that big upset, but they remained welterweight players. Each upset added a new face to a red-hot 140-pound division. And I think we with Andy Ruiz's upset, I think he remains a top 5 heavyweight. And so when you look at who the top 5 are, who the top 3 is depends on your opinion. I think Ring Magazine has it Tyson Fury number 1, Deontay Wilder number 2, Anthony Joshua number 3, and Andy is either 4 or 5. In that mix you have Dillian White, and you have Alexander Usyk, who's in there. He's still proving himself as a heavyweight, but because he was the undisputed cruiserweight and he was such an awesome amateur. After one heavyweight fight, he's already considered a player. And you have guys who are fun to watch, like Adam Kaunacki. So when you mix that 5 or 6 up, you have a nice little round robin, don't you? And Andy plays a big part of that. And I'd love to see Andy Ruiz versus Kaunacki or against Luis Ortiz. So there's fights to be made for Ruiz within the PBC league, and if he can kick ass there, maybe if Deontay Wilder beats Tyson Fury in their rematch, which hopefully that still happens in February, you never know, but let's say it does happen, and if the Bronze Bomber detonates and takes out the Gypsy King, that's still a big fight. Deontay Wilder defending the WBC title against Andy Ruiz, that would still be an anticipated fight. So I think Ruiz his career is still there. It's just he's not going to be as big as he would have been had he beaten Anthony Joshua in the rematch. But he's still a player. The upset still makes him a player. And I think he has to regain the trust of the fans. But heavyweights are always one big win away from being back on top of the mountain. It's always been that way. It's a glamour division.
Dougie, with ESPN, Fox, and DAZN, the TV contracts, if ever, do you think we'll see the Wilder, Fury, Joshua mix?
Yeah, I think eventually. I mean, listen, ESPN and Fox are doing business because heavyweights are involved. They're not doing it. They didn't seem willing to do so with Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, or Terrence Crawford, and one of the other elite level PBC welterweights. But they are willing to do it with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder because of the potential. Because you have two heavyweights who have personalities, and Fury is the ultimate showman, and Deontay Wilder, he also kind of has that pro wrestler type persona, but also he's got the punching power. He's very exciting when he fights. So the combination, they showed potential with their first fight. Their first fight was dramatic. The highlights of that first fight sell the rematch. But just that combination, the first fight did enough pay-per-view buys to make all involved realize, like, listen, okay, if they can do that number via Showtime, okay, what if we have the Fox and ESPN platforms working for us? How many more pay-per-view buys can we get? And so it's worth it for them. It's worth it for them to combine and do business. Now, the fact that DAZN is a streaming platform and not a traditional network, that makes things difficult. But, I think, if the money is there, if Anthony Joshua has a successful first half of 2020, I think there will be negotiations between Team Joshua and whoever wins the Wilder-Fury rematch. And if it can't be made in the fall of 2020, I think there'll be serious negotiations for it to happen in 2021. Because if it's Deontay Wilder who emerges victorious against Fury, there's Andy Ruiz out there that he could defend the title against. But beyond Andy Ruiz, where's the big fight for Deontay Wilder? And he's already in his 30s. And I think he's pretty well preserved. Punchers last long because they don't go a lot of rounds. And, most folks are kind of, they're afraid to put it on him when they share the ring with him. But at some point, he's got to worry about, being on the other side of that hill and leaving his prime years. And he might be willing to do it. Like, hey, listen, let me cross the street and fight on DAZN, and we'll work out a deal where, the first fight is on DAZN, and the rematch, regardless of what happens, moves over to Fox or whatever. They got to figure out some way of divvying up the rights to what would be a huge heavyweight showdown. But I just think there's too much money involved for the fight not to happen. And both guys are still trying to forge their legacy. So it's not like a Manny Pacquiao Floyd Mayweather situation where, like, they didn't care. Like, both of those guys, by the time Manny Pacquiao had entered the welterweight division, he'd already done enough. He'd already sort of secured a legacy. He'd already done enough to, like, ensure being a first ballot Hall of Famer. And the same was true for Floyd Mayweather. Like, Manny Pacquiao had been voted in the Boxing Writers Association of America, their fighter of the decade. Okay, going into 2010, he was the fighter of the decade. So that tells you something, And the runner-up to Manny Pacquiao was Floyd Mayweather. You know what I'm saying? So it was like those guys had already done enough to where their legacies were already secure. But with Wilder and Joshua, kind of like they need each other to secure their legacy, if you know what I'm saying. And right now, they're both at their peak. They're both still in their athletic prime. And heavyweights, for sure, a little slower than other lighter divisions. So they've got a couple of years, but, they don't have that long. So there is a shelf life to this thing to be made. And I think both guys realize it. So I do think, I think business can be done, and some kind of deal can be reached. Some kind of business arrangement can be reached where we eventually do see Anthony Joshua versus either Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury.
And transitioning to actually this Saturday from Madison Square Garden in New York City on ESPN, Terrence Crawford defends his WBO welterweight world title against Mean Machine Kavaliauskas. Obviously, you being involved, especially in the boxing business, Dougie, everybody hears the criticism of Crawford and, that he can't get these, like you touched on, legacy fights for like AJ and Wilder needing each other. I mean, Crawford obviously needs the PBC welterweights and, him being top ranked,
Yeah.
promotional politics. Before going down that route, of course, what do you think of this fight this Saturday?
I got to be honest with you. I've never been a big Mean Machine booster. He's a tough guy. He's a decent technician, a little bit awkward. I think he can be a little bit sloppy. I think he gets frustrated at times. He's never blown me away, but I do know he's strong. I do know he can punch. I do know he's very dedicated. He's always in the gym. He's trying to learn as much as he can. I think he's out of his depth against Bud Crawford. I think Crawford will outclass him, but I enjoy watching Crawford fight, even second-tier guys. Crawford fighting Jose Benavidez was still enjoyable to watch, even though Benavidez was not a legitimate top 10 welterweight contender. He was game. He's a big, strong, game welterweight with some pop, and it was still compelling to watch how Crawford went about undressing him, outclassing him, figuring him out and closing that fight strong. That's what I like about Crawford. He's a versatile fighter. He's a complete boxer puncher, but he tries to close the show. And I just enjoy watching. I'm just going to enjoy watching Crawford do his thing. Where does he go after handling the Mean Machine? Because I do believe the machine will break down. I think he's going to have to just wait it out. I think he's going to have to be like Bernard Hopkins was, where he didn't get big fights until the elite welterweight stepped up to middleweight. He needed a Felix Trinidad to move up to junior middleweight and then middleweight, and then they had their showdown, and then Oscar De La Hoya to do the same thing. Those were his big fights. Those were his pay-per-view fights. Those were his money fights. And they're a big part of his legacy. They're not his only legacy, the only parts of his legacy, but they're big parts of his legacy. He needed that sort of crossover. And I think the same is true for, and you could say the same was true for Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He needed Roberto Duran to have big enough balls, to say, hey, to hell with it. I'm gonna fight this guy. I know he's the undisputed middleweight champ, but he's not that tall, and I don't think he's all that special. I think I'm better than him, so let's do it. And they did what they did for 15 rounds in 1983, and I think that encouraged Tommy Hearns to do the same thing 2 years later, and it encouraged Sugar Ray Leonard eventually to come out of retirement. And Marvelous Marvin Hagler needed those fights. Those were legacy fights for him. Those were the big money fights for him. Those were the fights where he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, Mm-hmm. So I think Bud Crawford, he reminds me a lot of a Marvelous Marvin Hagler. And in some ways, he reminds me of Bernard Hopkins. Actually, in many ways, he reminds me of Bernard Hopkins. Just his personality kind of reminds me of B-Hop. So he needs these guys at 140 pounds to step up to 147. And there are three really good junior welterweights out there. And one of them happens to reside on his side of the street with top-ranked ESPN, and that's Jose Ramirez.
Right.
And if Jose Ramirez gets his wish, he'll fight the Ring Magazine champion, Josh Taylor, who's a tall, rangy, southpaw, 140-pounder, who unified titles against Regis Prograis. And Prograis is the third junior welterweight standout. And I think any of those three, if they were to step up to 147 pounds, I think they would carry the weight okay. And it's not like Crawford's a giant welterweight. Crawford started at lightweight, moved up to 140 pounds, where he became the undisputed champion and the Ring Magazine champion. And now he's at 147. And he doesn't have any dance partners. And these guys are young. They're hungry. They're proven. And if you look at who they fought, they've earned their way to the top of the 140-pound division. And I don't think they'll be scared of Crawford at all. And they bring their styles, their unique styles, to that big dance. And hopefully they get there. And I would love to see Crawford face Prograis, Josh Taylor, or Jose Ramirez. An ideal situation would be Josh Taylor fights Jose Ramirez for all the marbles at 140 pounds. So they answer the question once and for all: who's the best at junior welterweight, and who is the undisputed champion? So whoever wins that fight, they equal what Crawford did, but against better opposition. And then the winner of that fight can move up to 147. And I think that's a big fight. Now, is it a huge pay-per-view fight? No, I don't think so. But it's a significant fight within the boxing universe.
Now, Dougie, obviously since the Ring Magazine's been around for a long time, for years and years and years, and you're the head of it.
Almost 100 years.
Yeah, it's getting close.
Yeah, knock on wood, we make it. Yeah.
And then you guys, a lot of people reference your guys' rankings for, media articles, what have you. What's your take on, I know pound for pound lists and stuff like that, rankings lists are essentially subjective. But
oh yeah,
I mean, you know that better than anybody. But at least with the issue with some people, obviously on Twitter or boxing fans, the hardcore boxing fans have with Terrence Crawford is that some people rate him high because they can see he passes the eye test. Obviously, he has special abilities, but some people don't feel it's necessary or it's justified to rate him that high because he doesn't have the resume, he doesn't have the opponents. What do you think about those two issues?
It's a tough case with him because he's never been in with a star. He's never been he's never shared the ring with a really popular fighter. But he's 35-0, and that record spans, and he's been dominant in all his fights too. And he's fought a lot of legitimate contenders, and that record spans 3 weight classes. I mean, he was the Ring Magazine champion at lightweight and at junior welterweight, and at junior welterweight he was undisputed, and he won all 4 major 140-pound titles. So he's got the accomplishment, and like I said, he hasn't beaten any big names. But when he fought Yuriorkis Gamboa at lightweight, Gamboa was still unbeaten. Now Gamboa wasn't a natural lightweight, and that we need to recognize that. He was basically a blown up featherweight, but he was an immensely talented featherweight who was also an Olympic gold medalist. He also beat Victor Postol, who was unbeaten at the time. And I believe when he fought Postol was the number 1 rated by Ring Magazine junior welterweight, and Crawford was the number 2 rated junior welterweight according to Ring Magazine, and that's why he won the Ring Magazine title by beating Victor Postol. But Postol was from that Ukrainian amateur school and a very difficult stick and move specialist, a very difficult style to deal with in there. And all you have to do is look at Postol's fight against Lucas Matisse, who he frustrated and then knocked out. And then look at Victor Postol's fight with Josh Taylor, who we know is a hell of a fighter. And I would say the Ukrainian gave Taylor fits. He gave him a hard night's work. So that lets you know that, and Crawford dominated Postol. I mean, Crawford figured out Postol within like 2 or 3 rounds, and then dominated the rest of the way. And it wasn't a barn burner by any stretch of the imagination. And it's hard to look good against Postol, but Crawford was dominant against Postol. And he has other wins. He's got a lot of just solid contenders in there. Does that make him number 1 pound for pound? No, I don't think so. And in fact, he's been slipping in Ring Magazine's pound for pound rankings because at welterweight his reign has been rather undistinguished because he can't get the big fight. He won the WBO title from a rather weak belt holder, and that was Jeff Horn. Defended it against Jose Benavidez and
Amir Khan.
Who was the last spot? Amir Khan, yeah.
Yeah.
Amir Khan's seen better days. We all know that. And those guys were not. Listen, Jeff Horn was ranked by Ring Magazine, not high. Maybe he was like number 7 or 8 or something like that. And Benavidez and Amir Khan were not ranked at all. I think the Mean Machine, Kavalishkas, he's like he's number 8. I think he's our 8th rated welterweight. So it's hard for him to maintain his lofty status within our own pound for pound rankings because there's other fighters that are kicking ass, like Naoya Inoue. I think Inoue surpassed him, just replaced him as the number 3 on our pound for pound top 10. I think number 1 is Canelo right now. Number 2 is Vasily Lomachenko. Number 3 is Inoue. Number 4 is Terence Crawford.
And moving on to probably the biggest fight of the weekend, Dougie, we have Richard Comey, 29-2, the IBF lightweight title, facing Teofimo Lopez. The winner probably should be moving on to fight Vasyl Lomachenko. How do you see that fight going?
I like it. I like the fight a lot. I think that Comey will test Lopez in ways we haven't seen Lopez tested, because Comey can hit Lopez back just as hard as Lopez can hit Comey. I like that Comey is still in his prime. I like that Comey is trained by Andre Rozier, and they've had some fights together, because I think Rozier is a world-class trainer and a very good cornerman. I think Comey's got his confidence going right now. So it's a handful for Teofimo. I slightly favor Teofimo Lopez because he's a very special athlete. He's a very good boxer, but he's going to have to box to the best of his ability. Comey's kind of rangy. Comey's got that experience. He had been to the big dance before he'd finally won a major world title at 135 pounds. I thought his fight with Robert Easter could have gone either way. And the fight against, what was the Russian fighter's name? Dennis the Menace. Shafikov?
Shafikov, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and didn't Comey travel all the way to Russia to fight Shafikov?
I believe so.
But Comey's got some character, He's from Ghana. He traveled to fight the best in the U.S., traveled to Russia to fight. He's battle tested, is what I'm trying to say here. This guy's been in hard 12-round battles, and Lopez has not. And the fact that Comey can punch, the one thing you can say about Lopez's opponents, he's faced some solid opponents. I don't think he's faced a bona fide puncher yet. Somebody where Lopez tries to assert himself, somebody can hit him back and be like, man, back the fuck off. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He hasn't faced that guy yet, and I think Comey can be that guy. So I'm looking forward to this fight, and I want to see how Lopez reacts when he gets nailed with a flush right hand, because I think it's going to happen at some point. But I favor I don't think Lopez can get Comey out of there, but I favor Lopez by decision. Lopez is not just a really good boxer and a precocious boxing talent. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. Unless he drains himself to make 135 pounds, I think that athleticism will serve him well.
Dougie, do you think the issues behind the scenes with Teofimo Lopez will affect him? Like the change of trainer, moving? It might. I think the family drama can affect anybody. Families can be very distracting. And when family doesn't get along, when people aren't getting along, that can weigh on you. Now, some fighters can tune it out. Some fighters thrive on the chaos, and others, it takes a toll on them, and that shows in their performance. But we won't know how Lopez deals with that until he steps into the ring on Saturday.
And Dougie, one thing I wanted to touch on, because we had told some people that you were going to be on, and there was a couple people who actually asked me, and I think it's just so interesting, just because he regardless that he hasn't lived up to the expectations because of his dad's legacy, that especially the Mexican Americans and Mexican fans are still interested in Chavez Jr. And they wanted me to ask.
Are
you,
they?
Yeah,
I guess so.
It's crazy.
Well, let me tell you something. I've covered a lot of Canelo Alvarez's big fights. I was there for Canelo's U.S. debut against Larry Mosley when he was like 18 years old out in the desert. I think it was at the Morongo Casino.
Yeah.
And I was there in Anaheim when he won his first world title against Matthew Hatton. That was in 2011. And I was there for all of his stadium fights in Texas, against Austin Trout and against James Kirkland and against Liam Smith. in Dallas and his big fights in Vegas, against Cotto and, of course, Triple G. I got to tell you, the atmosphere for Canelo Alvarez's fight against Chavez Jr. was the biggest by far.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and the media turned out, not just Mexican media, but media from around the world.
Yeah.
I mean, there were television crews from Japan that were there doing special weigh-in shows. I mean, and it was just the Grand Garden Arena at the MGM was absolutely packed to the rafters for that weigh-in. And there was a buzz all fight week, even though we knew, at least us hardcore heads and us insiders, we knew that Chavez was totally drained. He was totally drained going into that fight. He looked like a zombie.
Yeah.
He was terrible, and we knew his track record too going into that fight. But that Chavez name carries a lot of weight. I mean, it's like magic. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. I shouldn't be surprised that there are some people that are still interested in watching Junior fight and are interested in this matchup with Daniel Jacobs.
Yeah, he's I guess I would label him as polarizing. I also wanted to get your take on because he obviously has his hearing with the Nevada State Athletic Commission this week. I believe it's on Thursday.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to come out of that? Do you think he's actually going to be able to fight on the 20th against Jacobs in Phoenix? Or?
Yeah, I think he will. Regardless of what happens with his hearing with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, I think Arizona will give him a pass. One of the problems we have in boxing in the U.S. scene is that it's state by state. It's the commission should recognize each other's suspensions, but they don't always do that. And I don't know. I think the fight goes on. If it doesn't, whatever. If it doesn't happen, we haven't seen the loss. We haven't seen the last of Chavez Jr. I was just thinking about it. Just you guys bringing him up. Junior is kind of like Andy Ruiz Jr. He's like people like he's a likable guy. I don't know if you guys have ever met Chavez Jr., but
yeah,
he's cool. He's fun to interview. He's a nice guy. He's a fun guy, and people like him for better or for worse. Maybe he's his own worst enemy. I think he is his own worst enemy. But I do think he should be taken to task for not submitting samples for VADA when they came a knocking at the Wildcard Boxing Club. And I'm glad that the Nevada Athletic Commission is doing that. And I think all commissions should do that. I don't think fighters, there should be, a matter of fact, I think there should be a number of doping, at drug tests that you can miss before losing your license for like an entire year or for 2 years. Like, I think if you miss more than 2 drug tests and you don't have the absolute ironclad best excuse for doing so, I think your license should be revoked because it smells too funny, and it's too dangerous for these guys to be on that jungle juice.
Dougie, since we're talking about tests, what's your opinion on the Dylan White saga, the shambles of passing a VADA test and then 3 days?
You know what? My opinion is that UCAD, the UK anti-doping, or is it called UCAD?
Yeah, UKAD, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
United Kingdom Anti-Doping, is that what it is?
That's correct, yeah.
They suck. They don't handle stuff right. They didn't, they botched, they screwed things up with Tyson Fury. I don't get it. Like, I don't get that whole thing with Tyson and Hughie failing a drug test and then them not releasing that information until like after Fury fought Vladimir Klitschko. That was a mess. That put everybody in a really just like precarious position. It put everybody in a messed up position. And then it's like when they get sued, it's like they get scared, they back off, whatever. Whatever was going on, that pissing contest between Tyson Fury and UCAD, and then the way they kind of settled it was just bullshit. I don't like the way they handle things. I really don't. I don't like the way USADA handles things either. I don't trust them. But the way they handled the Tyson Fury situation and the way they handled the Dillian White situation, bottom line with me, I don't really trust them. I don't. They don't seem sincere.
That's boxing
And they
for you.
seem like they roll over. They seem like if you're a powerful enough figure, or you're backed with powerful figures, and you flex on them, they roll over. That's what it looks like. That's just what it looks like on the surface. I don't know all the details, but I don't. Just based on these two cases, Tyson Fury, or both Hughie and Tyson Fury, and the Dillian White case. I just don't like the way they handle it. I think they need to handle things better. And which is not to say, by the way, that I think Dillian White is guilty. That I think that he had whatever, that he was juiced to the gills or whatever. Whatever. I'm just saying the way that they handle it makes it look bad. The way that they handle these things, it incites hardcore fans and members of the media to ask questions that they should be asking, but also suspect them.
Right.
It looks bad. Yeah. Well,
on that note, Dougie, we appreciate your time once again jumping on here on the last round with us. Your insight is always appreciated.
Thanks for having me on. Sorry if I ramble on a bit. I just
No. You're the last time you were on.
I talk a lot.
No. Yeah, actually, our listeners actually like that. When we had you on the first time, there was a lot of people.
Yeah, but next time I come on, if I'm droning on too long, feel free to either of you to jump in and interrupt me or whatever, keep things moving or whatever. I'm just sitting here, kind of back in my home office, and just it's like I'm just chatting with somebody. And occasionally people will walk in the room, and I tell my family, "Hey, I'm going on a podcast. Don't come back here." And not everybody gets the message. So sometimes I'm talking, but I'm giving one of my daughters the evil eye because she's walking through here, messing with stuff, making noise, or whatever. But anyway, no, seriously, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And then I know you're not going to be on the fights on Friday, but we'll be there. And then really quick, touching on that. Virgil Ortiz, what do you think his ceiling is?
Oh my gosh, I think he can be a star. I like this matchup. I think it's going to be a challenge for him. Brad Solomon has been inactive, but he's battle tested. He's got good experience. I know he's a good athlete. I know he presents a difficult style. And let's face it, Ortiz needs to go round. And so this is somebody who should be able to take him round because of his proven chin and because of his style. But I think Virgil Ortiz has a very high ceiling. For my money, he's the prospect of the year. I know some people think it's Jaron Ennis. I know others think it's the UK heavyweight, Daniel Dubois. There's some other guys out there. There's a lot of folks from Eastern Europe and Central Asia that are making noise with just a few fights. There's always, a Japanese strawweight out there, Japanese junior flyweight ready to fight for a world title, in 5 or 6 fights. You know what I mean? And right now they're 3-0 and 4-0. And I know, those guys will emerge. But for my money, if Virgil Ortiz shines against Brad Solomon, that'll be 4 fights in 2019. And 3 of them were against solid, veteran, seasoned opposition. I'm talking about Mauricio Herrera, who he KO'd in frightening, chilling fashion. That's Antonio Orozco, and then Solomon. If he can knock out Solomon, forget about it. He's definitely prospect of the year, and maybe he proves that he's a legitimate welterweight contender. But time is on his side. I'm in no rush to see him fight Keith Thurman, who I think he called out recently. I'm in no rush to see him fight Keith Thurman next year or in his next bout or two. I think there's time to develop him. He's just 21 years old. But I think by the time he's 23 and he's up to 17, 18, 19 fights, man, I think he could be a world beater. I really do. I think he's going to be very special. I'm super high on Virgil Ortiz. Hey, I was high on Virgil Hill 30 years ago.
Well, Dougie, like we said, once again, we appreciate you taking the time out of your night to jump on and discuss some boxing with us here. We wish you nothing but the best of luck over there at the Ring Magazine, and we hope to talk to you again on when you guys hit 100 years soon.
Yes, sir.
All right, Dougie, you take care.
Have me on before the 100th birthday.
No, of course we will. But when you hit the 100 years, we'll probably get you on again. At that milestone.
Oh yeah, and that'll be a special occasion for sure.
All right, Dougie, thanks a lot for your time. We appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
You too. Editor-in-Chief of the Ring Magazine, Dougie Fischer. Once again, we want to give our thanks to him for jumping on episode 60 of The Last Round. I don't know who else is better, Mike, to discuss fights with.
I think we always say it every time he comes on, you could just listen to him all night. Boxing historian, knows everywhere in the globe, all the different fighters. So crazy.
But I know there was a couple fights we didn't touch on. Charlo did defeat Dennis Hogan over the weekend and retained his WBC middleweight world title. So there was that. Obviously, Virgil Ortiz fights this Friday. We mentioned that. But I'm sure we'll dive into those a little more next week. But once again, guys, we appreciate you guys listening to episode 60 of the Last Round podcast. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Audio Boom, what have you, we appreciate it. And we will be at the fights on Friday. Mike will actually be there on Friday at Fantasy Springs Casino for the Virgil Ortiz Golden Boy fight. So if you see him, give him a shout out. Tell him to shout you out on the next episode of The Last Round, and maybe he'll be nice enough to give you a shout out. But once again, thank you guys for listening, as we mentioned, to episode 60 of this podcast, The Last Round. And for my co-host, Michael Shepard, I'm Danny Z. This is The Last Round.
Thanks for supporting and listening to the show. Follow us at The Last Round 12 on social media. Rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Last Round.